You know, President Kennedy spoke at Trinity in 1958 when he was a senator. He gave the commencement address, and he really inspired the class of '58 to go on to careers in politics. It's notable that Barbara Bailey Kennelly, class of 1958, was the very first Trinity woman in Congress, and I think she took some inspiration from him. But he gave a very powerful commencement address in which he said that Trinity graduates should certainly do public service, should certainly be engaged, but quite specifically should become involved in politics. And he said we need smart people, we need engaged people, we need leaders. So he challenged all Trinity women to be leaders politically for our nation. Oh, where was I when President Kennedy was shot? I was in the 5th grade at St. Margaret's Grade School in Narberth, Pennsylvania. I had just turned 11 years old, and I remember that day so well. The sisters all acted kind of strange that afternoon, and they didn't tell us what was going on, but they dismissed us early. And as we were walking in line down the street 2 by 2 with an arm's length between us, like good Catholic school kids, some of the boys in the back of the line were whispering, "President Kennedy's been shot." Well, I couldn't believe it. And I ran down the street to the local drugstore. It was called Davis's at that time. And there in Davis's, the radio was on, and we heard the news that the president had been shot. So I ran home, and my mother was there, and Mom was not exactly a fan of President Kennedy, but she was so upset. She was crying. And I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she said, "The president is dead." And what I realized even then was that even though my folks had political disagreements with President Kennedy, they were scared and stunned and appalled that anyone would assassinate the president. And we went into a long weekend then of being glued to the television. It's been said that the Kennedy assassination and the funeral were the first really major televised events, and that was true. We didn't leave the living room that weekend. We watched that funeral cortege. I can still hear the drums banging the mournful tone. We saw Jack Ruby shoot Lee Harvey Oswald and kill him. We saw JFK's son, John Jr., give his little salute to the casket. It was very memorable. It stayed with me all these years. What's the enduring lesson of President Kennedy? You know, when I look at all the commemorative events of this week and all of the reminiscences in newspapers and magazines and on television, I sometimes think that our nation is a little bit like a lover who is still mourning the death of a loved one years ago. We have never quite found the magic of Camelot again. Many presidents have tried. None have truly succeeded. And I have to ask myself, well, what was it? He was only president for 3 years. And actually, during that short period of time, that brief 1,000 days, he did create the Peace Corps. That was terrific. But President Kennedy was unable to complete much of his agenda. The civil rights agenda, for example, was completed by President Johnson, and so on. But President Kennedy brought a sense of youth, a sense of optimism, and frankly, a sense of how to bring people together that few presidents since him have had. He had a great sense of humor, as you can see in his press conferences. He was erudite. He was very learned. He spoke well. He had charisma, something that, again, few politicians seem to have. Mostly, he brought a sense of hope to a nation that was still recovering from war in the early 1960s, and very few of our leaders today really bring that sense of enduring hope that he offered to us.